Littlenose was a boy who lived long, long ago. His people were called the Neanderthal folk. In the days when they lived, the world was very cold. It was called the Ice Age. There were lots of wild animals. Lions, tigers, bears and wolves had thick furry coats to keep them warm. Even the rhinoceros and a kind of elephant called a mammoth were big woolly creatures. The Neanderthal folk were stocky, sturdy people with short necks and big noses. They were very proud of their noses, which were large and snuffly. Littlenose got his name because his nose was no bigger than a berry. Littlenose's home was not a house, but a cave where he lived with his father and mother. Near the front of the cave, a huge fire was always burning. This kept the family warm and also frightened away wild creatures, which was just as well because there was no door in the cave. Sometimes Littlenose was naughty, which was very dangerous in those days. A child who strayed too far from the family cave or loitered on the way back from an errand was likely to become a tasty snack for a hairy animal, or to be squashed flat as a pancake by a short-sighted woolly rhinoceros. But today, Littlenose had done a terrible thing and was in disgrace. He had let the family fire go out while his parents were hunting. It was only the glare of the fire that kept the wild creatures away, as well as keeping the family warm. Littlenose sat at the back of the cave and watched his father frantically banging two stones together over some dead twigs, trying to relight the fire. There weren't any matches in those days, and you had to bang together two stones called flints so that you could get a spark and light a fire. Father cut his knuckles on the stones and hurled them across the cave in disgust. "Perhaps you need a new flint," said Mother. "I'll need a new son if he ever lets the fire out again," roared Father, and Littlenose expected to be thrown to the bears any minute. However, Father piled rocks in the cave entrance and settled down, club in hand, ready to stand guard during the night. Next morning, after a cold breakfast, Father prepared to set off to get a new flint. "Have you enough money?" said Mother. "I think so," he replied, taking out a handful of the coloured pebbles which people used for money in those days. "But I expect I shall have to haggle with old Skinflint to get something decent." He kissed Mother goodbye and was just about to leave when Littlenose blurted out, "Can I come too?" For a moment, Father was speechless. "After the way you behaved yesterday." "Well, all right then," he grumbled, and he strode off, leaving Littlenose to follow. "Goodbye, Littlenose," Mother called after him. "Be good, and remember always to look both ways before you cross." But Littlenose wasn't listening. He was too busy thinking about his secret. He had a pebble of his own, one green pebble, which he had found by the river. Perhaps today he would find something at the market worth buying. They made their way by a woodland path to where it was crossed by a broad animal trail, and Littlenose was about to dash straight across when a cuff on the ear nearly knocked him down, and Father exclaimed, "Don't you ever do what your mother tells you?" Shamefaced, Littlenose stood on the grass verge and looked right, looked left, and right again. And as he looked right the second time, a herd of woolly rhinoceros came round a bend. Father and Littlenose lay hidden in some bushes as the great beasts lumbered by. When the rhinos had passed, the travellers, seeing it was all clear, went on their way. Littlenose felt he had been walking forever when they left the woods and began climbing a grassy hillside towards a circle of trees. When they reached it, he realised that they had arrived. This was the market. Father said, "I wonder where old Skinflint is today. Ah, there he is." And he strode across to an old wrinkled man in a threadbare wolfskin who sat under a sign with his name on it. At least Littlenose thought it was his name, but when he got closer, he saw that the writing had once said, "Skins and flints for sale." But the weather had so faded the words that all that could be made out now was Skin Flint, which most people now thought was really the old man's name. Neither father nor the old man seemed in a hurry about the new flint, and Littlenose soon got bored and went off wandering through the market. But he didn't see anything he particularly wanted to buy, and had almost decided to keep his green pebble for another day, when, over the heads of the crowd, he spotted a sign. Mammoth Sale, Genuine Reductions. He pushed forward and came into a clear space, just as a little man standing on a tree stump was shouting, "5 red pebbles and bid, 5, going at 5, going, gone, sold to the gent in the lion's skin for 5 red pebbles." And while the gentleman in the lion's skin counted out his money, a huge woolly mammoth was brought over to him. "Oh," thought Littlenose, "if only I could buy one of those. I would march down the valley leading him by his trunk. Everyone would cheer, and when I got home I would... Oh dear, no, it's not such a good idea. I'm not even allowed pet mice in the cave." And feeling rather sad, Littlenose wandered away and sat down by the mammoth pen to rest. Suddenly he jumped as something tickled his neck. It was a trunk, but a very little one. Littlenose looked through the bars and saw the smallest, woolliest, saddest mammoth you could imagine. He climbed up and was reaching over the top rail to stroke his furry ears when he was seized by the scruff of the neck and a voice said, "And what are you doing, young man?" It was the man who was selling the mammoths. "Please, I was just looking at the mammoth," said Littlenose. "Don't tell stories," said the man. "We've sold the last one. I'm just shutting up shop." But at that moment the trunk came through the bars again and tickled the man's leg. He shouted for his assistant, who came running. "Look, they've done it again," he yelled, and the assistant peered into the pen. "This one's a reject. The eyes don't match. One red and one green." Littlenose held out his one green pebble. "I'll buy him." Well, can't charge you more than 8 white pebbles for a reject," said the auctioneer, and taking the green pebble from Littlenose, he gave him 2 white ones as change. The assistant opened the pen, and the little mammoth trotted out to his new owner. "1 red eye and 1 green eye," said Littlenose. "That makes 2 eyes. I shall call you that. 2 eyes." The market was almost deserted, but Littlenose stopped to buy a bundle of bone needles with his last 2 pebbles, and then started looking for father. But father found him first. "Where have you been?" he bellowed. "Come on, it's late, too late." And he let out a near-splitting yell, which sent 2 Eyes scampering away into the trees. "I've bought him! He's mine!" cried Littlenose. But father wasn't listening. He was already striding away down the hillside. As Littlenose hurried after his father, the mist closed in around them, and the sun became a dull red ball lying on the horizon. "Don't dawdle, you'll get lost!" called back father. But Littlenose kept tripping over small rocks, and each time he looked up, it was more difficult to make out the figure of his father in the growing darkness. He panted on, stumbling and tripping, and then he fell. When he scrambled up again, he was alone. "Father!" he called. "Father!" But all he heard were the echoes of his own voice. He began to run. He had never been lost before, and he was very frightened. As he ran, the sun set, and he was in pitch darkness. All around him he could hear animals growling and snorting, rustling in the undergrowth, and brushing past him as he ran. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath and listened. There was a rustling sound behind him, and it was growing louder. Littlenose began to run again, but as fast as he ran, the noise came closer and closer. Suddenly he tripped and fell. Too exhausted and terrified to move, Littlenose lay with his eyes closed as the sound grew louder. Now he could hear an animal breathing, but he dared not look up. Back home, Mother looked out as darkness fell. Soon there was a sound of footsteps, and Father groped his way into the cave. "Where's Littlenose?" said Mother. "Isn't he here?" said Father. "I lost him in the mist, and I thought the young rascal must have hurried home ahead of me." "Oh," said Mother, "he must be lost, out there in the dark. You must find him." Father quickly lit the fire, and carrying a lighted branch, he turned back the way he had come. The mist had gone, and in the moonlight the path lay clear before him. There were animal sounds among the trees, but no signs of Littlenose. Then something moved on the edge of a clearing. It moved into the open, and the torch glinted on a pair of eyes. One red, one green. It was a mammoth, and sitting on its back was Littlenose. "Hello, Father," he said. "I got lost, and Two Eyes followed me and brought me home." Mother saw the strange procession approaching the cave. Father was leading Two Eyes by the trunk, while Littlenose, his head nodding, sat on the mammoth's back. A few minutes later, Mother was tucking Littlenose up in bed. He reached out to her with a bundle in his hand. "I bought you some needles," he said, and fell asleep. The little mammoth was still patiently standing outside the cave until Father took its trunk gently in his hand and led it past the fire and into the corner where Littlenose slept. With a contented sigh and looking just like an enormous ball of wool, Two Eyes fell asleep as well.